Good evening, friends. Welcome to another installment of Wrestling with God. We are continuing with our series, which is Marriage Club. And with that in mind, thank you for hanging out with us for a bit. We won't keep you long, but again, we want to begin to develop and talk about the aspects of marriage. Back in 1984 was my first marriage, and like many of us, we think it will be forever. And again, like with many of us, it wasn't forever. And then you have to double back after all the craziness, insanity, the fighting and bickering and all that kind of thing, and try to actually examine what it is that a marriage really is. And so at the end of my first marriage, I think I shared this with you before, I was intent on trying to understand why it dissolved, and I learned some things. If you don't know how something works, then when it's broken, you're not going to know how to fix it. Back in the days where we first had those TVs that you had to go up and change the channel yourself, today what do? We throw it away and then just buy a new one, which I guess is indicative of the times, right? With marriage, no? Just throw it away and start a new one? Yeah, I don't think that's a good thing, because we're dealing with intimate relations that cause a soul tie that, whether you're a believer or not, you ought to be able to examine some of the things, maybe even in your own life or own marriage, where you've seen that the intensity, usually you'll see the intensity of the love, especially if there's children in that breakup. There's almost the ferocity of the hate, and really doing what most do to try to destroy the other part. Now, what happened from I love you to I hate you, or I hate you, or I love you? Come on, I mean, you know why? It's because the love wasn't genuine love in the first place. Because if it was, then there ought to be eternal love on one end, and what we've pretty much experienced in our day and age today is an infernal love. And when I mean an infernal love, we're talking about that is sourced or generated by, in the old days we used to see the cartoons where the little devil's on one shoulder and whispering in my ear, and the angel, it's, who are we going to listen to? And surprisingly enough, there's a scripture that says, to whom we yield ourselves will be the servants. To whomever we yield ourselves, whether it's to the Lord or to hell, for the lack of a better term. And so there is a lot to begin to consider and unwrap as I continue on this series called Marriage Club, where, like in that Fight Club, where we sort of got the title, one of the first rules of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club. Well, in this case, we're going to talk about Marriage Club. And that was just a tag really to, get you interested. But anyway, as I had stated a few minutes earlier, when I saw that the marriage was going to end, I worked ferociously and studied and prayed ferociously to try to examine what it was that we had entered into when we talk about this thing called a marriage. And even the religious folk of the day, when the Lord walked the earth, said, look, people get divorced. In the law, it says we're not supposed to do that. And Jesus even said, look, there was a writing of divorcement given because of the hardness of your hearts. And that's a real key issue there in light of becoming open and supple enough that we can be like a tree planted by the rivers of water that bring forth fruit in his season. And so as I began to examine my particular marriage and came up with this 18-page document called a Bill of Divorcement that I sent to my first wife, within 24 hours overnight mail, after the divorce was written in ink, done, stamped, final, because I was convinced that she did not want to continue in this relationship. I don't even want to call it a marriage per se. And I know we want to always fit our preconceived notions to be able to feel good and no matter what we do in life. But here at the Wrestling with God, we're not giving everybody a trophy just because you deserve one. What you need to understand that a genuine marriage can never be broken, ever. You've heard the statement where it says, what God hath joined together, let no man put asunder, or no man break apart. Listen, if it's real, and I'm not saying that there aren't any circumstances whatsoever, but if it's real, then you know what you have? You have essentially one soul in two bodies. And that, in today's day and age, in light of the disparity and disagreements that we have, is almost unthinkable, especially now we started with the men is from Mars and women are from Venus. Just a bunch of insanity, that we're all equal. It's not about equality from the standpoint of thinking or ability or physicality or mentality or even emotion. It has to do that we were all designed for a specific purpose. And what we want to do is we want to change that purpose. But in Amos 3:3, it says, can two walk together unless they are agreed? Divorce, the cutting of the matrimonial bond to free fully, relieve, release, dismiss. Divorce, the legal dissolution of marriage in the widest sense, including judicial separation and decree of nullity, severance, to dissolve the marriage of, to put away, by divorce, to separate. Divorce, I want you to think of this statement. And again, this is all in my I worked on this thing like crazy. If anything, it was cathartic, right? And you can decide. So anyway, this is the last definition I have here about a divorce. Divorce, the dividing of minds. We talk about being one mind, one spirit, one together, oneness, and all that kind of a thing. And again, in today's day and age, some of these things believe or sound like they're insurmountable, but they're not. So the purpose. In 2 Corinthians 7:12, the Apostle Paul wrote, therefore, although I wrote to you, I did not do it for the sake of him who had done the wrong. Always looking, everybody's going to find fault, huh? So I didn't write to you for the sake of him who had done the wrong, nor the sake of him who suffered wrong, but that our care for you in the sight of God might appear to you. And so one of the things I had squared up and framed, that because I had sent this to my ex-wife 24 hours earlier, so she could get a sense of, at least I was trying to understand it. I don't know if she read it. I don't know if she threw it in the trash. I still have mine. And I said that the purpose of this document is to establish order. Okay? Actually, all sin is an inversion of order. To set in order those things that are out of order. Most marriages end in the divorce court, and the world alone judges. Caesar is not the only judge, meaning, the county of Sarracino, county of, Broward County, county of Charlotte County. It says, there is one, however, greater than Caesar, who judges the hearts. And Jesus answered and said to them, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And they marveled at him. And then it goes on to say, Adam became a life-giving spirit. However, the spiritual is not first, but the natural, and afterward the spiritual. So, we had talked a little bit last week while we were dealing with some of that other brouhaha that I brought into the wrestling with God thing about, you staying in your lane and I'll stay in mine. We talked about if you put the seed from a man and the egg from a woman in a petri dish, and until that seed enters into the egg, that's not a marriage. If anything, you know what we can call it? And it's probably how a lot of the marriages we've just accepted where we're at today. It's really cohabitation. As long as the seed of a man and that petri dish is outside of the egg from the woman in that that's not a marriage. We call that a petri dish for a reason, which is sort of the embryonic fluid spiritually that we all live in, but as long as they're separate and not one, and they don't become one flesh, they don't become one, the seed, the egg doesn't become one cell. You've just got really cohabitation, and to a large degree, especially once that marriage gets into past its honeymoon stage and beyond. If anything, it's degrees of toleration. You just figure out what it is that you're willing to tolerate from that other person. And that's not a true marriage. Now, why would this be important, and why in this series called Marriage Club, I talked about plan for the divorce? The reason is not that you might get divorced, but that you know how a marriage works, and that's what we're going to be talking about. Just like the seed and the egg. There's a reason when Nicodemus came to Jesus under the cover of night and said, Master, we know that you're sent from God. For no man can do the things that you do unless he was sent from God. And Jesus said to Nicodemus, Nick, unless a man is born again, he cannot see. And we talked a lot in our last session called the 2x4 about seeing. And rather than rehearsing that, you need to understand that the scriptures weren't written haphazardly. He used the term born again for a purpose. He didn't use the term microwaved again. He used the term born again. Many relationships, we will jump into them without an examination. Most of us anymore, there's no hanging out, getting to know one another. A lot of us move in together, and then that's just it. Then all the garbage begins to hit the fan, and then we begin to blame one another. And really what's happened is that relationship was out of order from the beginning. And can it be repaired? Yeah, it could be repaired, but it takes work. It takes understanding some of these things, A true marriage is one where there is a term called mutuality. It doesn't have to be equal in the sense of ability so much. It has to, another term we use is covenant. A mutuality is giving and a receiving. And again, I always like to spice things up a little bit, and I'll be more careful this time. And again, for the lack of a better term, if you had a spouse, I won't use the term woman at this point in time, but if you had a spouse, and every time there was the opportunity for intimate relationship, and she just laid there and essentially said, just Just do me. Does that sound like mutuality to you? Does that sound like a giving and a receiving? No, it really, really doesn't. And because things have gotten so out of order in light of relationships today, many of us who are seeing what we think are aberrant relationships, and we love to point at them and apply the pulpit pound of intolerance, we don't recognize that to a large degree, because we're supposed to be the leaders, we're supposed to be the ambassadors, we're supposed to be the representatives of the Lord, we're supposed to be the example to follow, and in many instances we've failed. Doesn't mean we can't right the ship, but we left a vacuum so big. It's, the emotion du jour now sets in. So, people think it's okay to marry animals, or male and male and female. I'm not saying that you can't. I'm just saying let's talk about order before you get defensive. I'm not telling you what you need to do. Don't tell me what to do. I'm just trying to share principles. If you don't like it, well, don't give as much next time when you're sending your offering to, just kidding, to Wrestling with God. I mean, come on, lighten up. You guys are so wound up, so tight today, in today's day and age. Loosen up a little bit. Give yourselves a little bit of room. Realize that we can still be pliable and we can still learn some things. And recognize that what we have is a purpose going forward to show our children, to show the world, to be able to have peace when we come home, is really built within some of these principles of actually what a marriage is and how it works. And so I think I'll try to bring it to a close from this standpoint. No matter what you believe about marriage, and no matter what you believe about relationships, we need to understand that it always takes, listen to me carefully, it always takes two components to signify life. Two components to signify life. And if all we do is stop it, well, it takes a man and a woman, and that's a marriage. Well, okay, that's a start. But do you know, as we begin to go deeper, it's more than just what a man and a woman is. It's finding out what a man is, what the lowest common denominator in light of spiritual things. But we need to understand what a man signifies and what a woman signifies. And when we can begin to do that, we might be able to actually help ourselves so that we can become better, less self-absorbed, less wanting to have everything our way, and not realizing that in some instances, as long as there's a mutuality, that giving is truly better than receiving in a relationship. So we'll probably continue this a little more in our next session, but I just wanted to back up just a little bit and again tell you a little bit more about our vision for Wrestling with God, and recognizing that it's my heart to be able to communicate what I've learned and what I've seen over the years in light of things like, for example, marriage. And if you find these sessions interesting at all, or even if you have any questions, you can write us there on our Facebook page, and maybe even ask us some questions in light of marriage. Maybe I'll address them at our next time that we share. But again, if you had one of those small TVs back in the day before you could just throw it away and buy a new one, thought I forgot, huh? If you don't have a TV repairman to come and fix it, the TV or the marriage stays broken. And so, in light of your relationships today, if you feel that you're in a marriage that's broken, recognize there's hope for you if you both want to work at it. You know, the Lord gave us marriage to signify a lot of things. As I stated, he didn't bring up the word about being born again for nothing. And I need you to realize that even in birth, if we're going to talk about born again in light of birth, how many of you know that essentially a birth occurs over a 40-week gestation? And in that time, that child has a chance to grow. See, that's why it's so important that you don't abort kids. Not because you can't. It's because when you begin to see these principles, you begin to understand how important life is. Not judging you, not trying to tell you what to do, but you need to understand that if nothing means anything anymore, then anybody can do anything, and then pretty soon we are back to chaos. And so there's always two components that signify life, and you thought I stopped at a man and a woman. But do you know faith has to be married to love before there's any life with that? Do you know that many of the religious rulers of that day, when Jesus walked the earth, they might have had faith, they might have had the knowledge of the Pentateuch and the scriptures at the time, but because it wasn't married with love, they became legalists. And we found that even when they found the woman who was caught in adultery, and they couldn't see beyond their legalism and didn't realize that compassion and faith married together actually will produce life. So whether it's faith and love, or a man or a woman, or there's so many other places we can go with this, just moving forward, take these little snippets and begin to think about them yourself. And as we try to come to you from week to week until I feel like we've addressed this, it's my prayer for you, at the minimum, just at the minimum, if you don't have an answer, pause long enough, because you'd be surprised how the Lord would intervene if you didn't quit shutting the door on his foot when he tries to put his foot in the door to help you out. And obviously there's still a lot of fear, and there's a lot of apprehension, there's a lot of trepidation in light of, what we know about God, which is a whole nother subject. Who God is and what he is. But if you'll follow after peace, if you'll recognize even from this moment forward that there's always hope, no matter what it is, no matter what subject we're talking about. And finally, as I actually close, you need to understand that in any circumstance, and I used to share this with my kids, and I've shared it with Joey, no matter what you're going through, you're not alone. And that ought to be comforting. Because if you recognize you're not alone, then you're beginning to enter into that bond of marriage with the Lord. How would I know that? Is because the scripture says that he who is joined to the Lord is one spirit. And it would be one spirit with him. But unfortunately for you, my friends, you don't get the lead. You just don't get the lead. It's just not how it works. So we'll be in touch. I appreciate our ring manager, director, step builder, friend, baker, Randy, for hanging in here with me. And we'll get back with you hopefully next week. God bless you guys. See ya.